My name is Paul Mwendo Mwanya. I'll be speaking to you. I'll be reading from the book of Mark, chapter 8, the whole chapter. So I commence reading. During those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciple to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way, because some of them have come a long distance. His disciple answered, But where in this remote place can we get enough bread to feed them? How many loaves do you have? 7, replied. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. When he had taken the 7 loaves and given them thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples to distribute to the people, and they did. So they had a few small fish as well. He gave thanks for them also, and the disciples to distribute them. The people ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up the 7 baskets of broken pieces that were left over. About 4,000 were present after he had sent them away. He got into the boat with the disciples and went to the region of Dalamantra. The Pharisees came and began to question Jesus. To test him, they asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply and said, Why does this generation ask for a sign? Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, just one moment. Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to it. Then he left them, got back into the boat, and crossed to the other side. Verse chapter 14. The disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for 1 loaf they had with them in the boat. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of the Herod. They discussed this with one another and said, It is because we have no bread. Anyway, aware of this decision, Jesus asked them, Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Or are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see, and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? Many of the basketful of pieces did you pick? 12, they replied. And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many baskets of pieces did you pick? They answered, 7. He said to them, Do you still not understand? Verse 22. They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus said, Do you see anything? He looked up and said, I see people. They look like trees walking around. Once more, Jesus put his hand on the man's eye. Then his eyes were open. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clear. Jesus sent him home, saying, Don't even go into the village. Jesus and his disciples went on to the village called Caesarea Philippi. On the way he asked them, Who do people say I am? They reply, Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets. But what about you? He asked. What do you say I am? Peter answered, You are the Messiah. Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Verse 31, he then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciple, he rebuked Peter. Get behind me, Satan, he said. You do not have in mind the concern of God, but merely human concern. Verse 34. Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, Whoever wants to be my disciples must deny themselves and take up their crosses and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for me and for the gospel will save it. Verse 36. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in the adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angel.